It was a sweltering summer morning in Karachi, and I had just returned home after a grueling 12-hour night shift at the port. My body ached, and all I wanted was a cold shower and a few hours of sleep. But as I approached my house, something felt off. The front gate was locked from the inside, and my key no longer worked. Confused, I knocked, then banged, calling out for my wife, Samina, and her son, Bilal. No response. After several minutes, Bilal appeared at the window, his face expressionless. "You're not welcome here anymore," he said flatly. "Ami says you need to leave." I was stunned. "What are you talking about? This is my house." He shrugged. "Not anymore." I stood there, drenched in sweat and disbelief, as the reality sank in. I had been locked out of my own home. Samina and I had been married for 5 years. She was 10 years older than me, a widow with a troubled son. I had taken on the role of provider, working long hours to support them. I never imagined they would turn on me like this. I tried calling Samina's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent messages pleading for an explanation, but received no reply. Desperate, I went to my friend Ahmed's place, where I could at least rest and think. The next day, I returned to the house with a police officer, hoping to resolve the situation. Samina finally came to the door, her face cold and unrecognizing. "You need to leave, Marcus," she said. "This is not your home anymore." I showed the officer the property documents, which clearly had my name on them. But Samina claimed I had abandoned the home and that she had the right to stay. The officer, seeing the domestic nature of the dispute, advised us to settle the matter in court. Feeling betrayed and powerless, I began to investigate. I discovered that Samina had been siphoning money from our joint account for months, transferring funds to a separate account in her name. She had also changed the locks and filed a false police report claiming I had threatened her, which explained the officer's reluctance to intervene. Determined to reclaim my life, I hired a lawyer and filed a case to assert my ownership of the property. The legal process was slow and emotionally draining, but I was resolute. In court, Samina's lies unraveled. The judge saw through her fabricated claims, especially when presented with evidence of the false police report and the financial records showing her unauthorized transfers. The court ruled in my favor, affirming my sole ownership of the house and ordering Samina and Bilal to vacate the premises. Returning to my home was bittersweet. The place was in disarray, a shadow of the sanctuary it once was. But I was determined to rebuild, to transform the house into a true home, filled with peace and integrity. I learned a hard lesson about trust and the importance of protecting oneself legally and emotionally. While the betrayal cut deep, it also propelled me into a journey of self-discovery and resilience. I emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined to live a life grounded in truth and respect. To anyone facing similar challenges, know that you are not alone. Seek support, stand firm in your truth, and never underestimate your capacity to overcome adversity. When I walked back into the house, I had fought so hard to win back. It didn't feel like a victory. The walls were the same. The furniture hadn't moved. But the warmth, the sense of home was gone. What remained was a cold shell soaked in betrayal. The silence felt heavy, louder than any argument I'd ever had with Samina. But I knew I had to keep moving. This house was mine. It was my future now. And I wasn't going to let their scheme define my story. The first few nights were the hardest. I'd wake up in the middle of the night expecting to hear footsteps down the hall or the sound of the kitchen faucet dripping. Things I used to ignore. Now, every quiet moment was a reminder of how much I had lost and how deeply I had been deceived. Samina had blocked me on every platform. Bilal had disappeared too. From what little I could find out through mutual acquaintances, they had moved into a small rental apartment on the outskirts of the city. Apparently, money was already tight. I couldn't lie and say I didn't feel a sense of grim satisfaction knowing the truth was catching up to them. But still, that wasn't enough. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. I focused on putting my life back together, starting with the house. Every broken cabinet, every stained carpet, every creaking floorboard. I fixed it all. Piece by piece, I took back control. It was more than just renovation. It was therapy. It gave me something to hold on to when my thoughts wandered to the night I was locked out after a brutal shift, confused and humiliated. And then came the day I visited the bank to close our joint account. The manager, a polite young man named Naveed, greeted me and began the process. That's when another layer of betrayal unfolded. Sir, we noticed some large transfers made from your joint account to a personal account under Mrs. Samina's name over the last 6 months, he explained. I already knew about those. But then, he added something new. She also listed a secondary beneficiary on a savings account. Her son, Bilal. I froze. Beneficiary? That account was meant for emergencies. He nodded. It was emptied 2 weeks ago. 25 lakhs withdrawn. That was the last of my savings. Money I had set aside in case we ever had a medical emergency. Or if Bilal wanted to go back to college. It had all been wiped clean. Not a single rupee remained. I went home that day and sat in my empty living room, staring at the sunlight creeping through the curtains. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial. They hadn't just pushed me out of the house. They had robbed me of everything I worked for. Still, I told myself, anger is fuel, but you have to use it the right way. So I hired a forensic accountant. Within weeks, we uncovered a pattern. Not only had Samina drained our joint accounts, but she had also taken a loan in my name using forged documents. It wasn't massive, but enough to hurt. 5 lakhs, taken out 3 months before I was thrown out. I reported it immediately. My lawyer helped file a criminal complaint. I wasn't after jail time, that was up to the courts. But I wanted the truth on the record. I wanted them to face the consequences of what they'd done. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. One of Samina's old friends, Shazia, reached out to me on social media. She said she needed to talk, and that she felt terrible for staying quiet. We met at a local cafe. I wasn't sure what to expect, but what she told me changed everything. Samina planned it, Shazia said, nervously stirring her coffee. She told me about it months before it happened. Said she was going to make you look bad, get sympathy from the neighbors, then kick you out and claim the house. She even said you were too nice to fight back. I stared at her, trying to absorb it. And Bilal, he was in on it? Shazia hesitated. He didn't just know. He helped. He was the one who wrote the fake messages they showed to their lawyer, the ones that claimed you were being abusive. That explained why the first police officer seemed so indifferent. They had manufactured a whole narrative behind my back. But the truth was out now. It wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about standing up for myself and showing others that betrayal doesn't have to define the rest of your life. With my lawyer's help, we reopened the police report that Samina had filed. We submitted the messages to a digital forensics lab. It turned out the messages were created from Bilal's phone. The lab traced timestamps and metadata, proving they had forged the entire thing. My lawyer sent them a formal legal notice, offering them a choice: publicly retract the false claims and repay the money, or face a defamation and fraud lawsuit. For a week, I heard nothing. Then came an email. Short, formal, and clearly written by a lawyer. They offered to settle. They would pay back the money, slowly in installments, and issue a retraction letter. It wasn't enough to heal the wounds, but it was a step toward accountability. I didn't reply immediately. I sat with it. I thought about who I had become in the past 6 months. I had gone from a man thrown out of his own home to someone who stood up for himself with dignity and determination. And I wasn't going to let them decide how the story ended. So I accepted the settlement. But I made one addition: a public apology letter that they had to mail to me and submit to the lawyer. I needed it, not for revenge, but for closure. When the letter arrived, I opened it carefully. The words were cold, legal, and probably written by someone else. But there it was in black and white: an admission that they had lied, stolen, and betrayed the one person who had stood by them. I put the letter away and closed that chapter of my life. Now, I wake up every morning in a house I rebuilt with my own hands. I make my own coffee, sit on my porch, and watch the sunrise without fear or resentment. I still carry scars from what happened, but they no longer control me. They remind me of the strength it took to stand up, fight back, and take my life into my own hands. And the best part? I did it all without sinking to their level. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply reclaiming your peace. It had been nearly a year since the day I was locked out of my own home. A year of rebuilding not just walls and finances, but myself. Some mornings I still felt echoes of the past. Those quiet moments of disbelief, the ache in my chest, the humiliation of being pushed aside like I didn't matter. But they didn't control me anymore. Those memories were part of my story, not the end of it. Life began to move again, slowly at first. I returned to my job at the port, where I had always been known as a dependable worker. My supervisor, a kind older man named Mr. Kasim, had heard rumors about what had happened and pulled me aside one day. "I've seen a lot of men fall apart when life hits them hard," he said, resting a hand on my shoulder. "But you, Marcus, you stood up. You rebuilt." That moment meant more than I could express. For so long, I had carried the weight of betrayal in silence, never fully sure if I was handling it the right way. But hearing someone acknowledge my effort, it reminded me that I hadn't just survived, I had grown. I started putting money aside again, this time in a new account under my name only. I learned to keep boundaries where before I had been too trusting. It wasn't about being bitter. It was about protecting the peace I had fought so hard to regain. One evening, as I was leaving the port, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a single sentence. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I truly am." There was no name, but I didn't need one. I knew it was Samina. For a moment, I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. Regret? Anger? Sadness? I typed a response, but then deleted it. There was nothing more to say. Some people seek forgiveness to ease their own guilt, not because they're truly ready to make things right. I had already moved on, and replying would only drag me back into something I had already left behind. A few weeks later, I bumped into Shazia again, Samina's old friend who had come forward to help me. We had a brief, polite conversation, and she told me that things hadn't been easy for Samina and Bilal. The apartment they had rented was in a crowded, noisy part of the city, and the money from the settlement had dried up quickly. "They're blaming each other now," she said quietly. "I don't think either of them expected you to stand up for yourself the way you did." I nodded, but I didn't feel smug. I felt resolved. Let them face what they had created. I no longer needed revenge. I had justice. And more importantly, I had peace. Later that month, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from a nonprofit organization that worked with young men recovering from troubled pasts. They were starting a mentorship program and had heard about my story from someone in the neighborhood. "We believe your journey could inspire others who are going through dark chapters in their own lives," the letter read. "Would you be interested in sharing your story?" At first, I wasn't sure. I wasn't used to being seen as a role model. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had needed someone during my darkest days. Someone who understood, who had lived through betrayal and come out stronger. So I said yes. I began volunteering a few evenings a week, sitting with young men who reminded me a lot of Bilal, confused, angry, not sure where to place their pain. I didn't preach. I just listened. And sometimes, when the moment felt right, I shared my own story, not as a warning, but as proof that even when everything falls apart, you can rebuild. I told them about the night I was locked out, the lies that almost broke me, and the quiet strength it took to fight back with dignity. I told them that sometimes people you love will let you down, not because you're weak, but because they see your kindness as something to exploit. But I also told them that resilience isn't born from revenge. It's born from choosing not to let bitterness win. One evening after session, a young man named Zayn came up to me. He had been quiet for weeks, always sitting in the back, never speaking. I thought about running away, he said, eyes downcast. But hearing your story, I think I want to try fixing things instead. That simple sentence made every painful step worth it. One Sunday morning, I stood in my now renovated kitchen, making tea and watching the sunlight spill across the floor. Everything was calm. No voices shouting in the background, no manipulation hiding behind forced smiles. Just peace. Real peace. There was a knock at the door. It was Bilal. He looked thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous twitch in his fingers. He didn't try to come in, he just stood on the step, awkward and unsure. I just wanted to say, I didn't know how deep it would go, he said. She told me it was just to scare you. I didn't think it would get so messy. I'm sorry. I watched him carefully. His words were hollow, but I sensed something else. Regret, yes, but also the weight of consequences catching up to him. I hope you learn from it, I said quietly, because some mistakes follow you forever. He nodded, turned, and left. I closed the door behind him, not out of anger, but out of finality. That chapter was done. Months passed, and life continued to unfold with surprising grace. I was promoted at work. I started writing. Just small reflections, stories from my life, things I never had time to put into words before. One of the pieces was even published in a local magazine. It was titled, "The House I Had to Lose to Truly Own." I don't know what the future holds. I may fall in love again someday, or maybe I won't. Either way, I know I will be okay. Because I've been through the fire. I've been lied to, stolen from, betrayed by the very people I once considered family. And I didn't let it break me. That, to me, is the best kind of revenge. Not destruction, but survival. Not bitterness, but growth. And every time I turn the key in my front door, I am reminded, this home is mine. Not just because my name is on the deed, but because I earned it. Not with money, but with strength, grace, and the will to rise again. Months had passed since Bilal showed up at my doorstep, offering that awkward apology. I hadn't seen him or Samina since. Their silence, in a way, was the only answer I needed. But life had a way of bringing things full circle, even when you least expected it. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I ran into an old neighbor from the previous neighborhood. Mr. Hayter, a retired school principal who used to chat with me during evening walks, waved me down as I left the grocery store. "Marcus," he called, gripping his umbrella tightly as he caught up to me. "I've been meaning to tell you, that boy, Bilal, he's been staying in the shelter downtown. My niece volunteers there." I raised my eyebrows, unsure how to respond. "He's not doing well," Mr. Hyder continued, a touch of sadness in his voice. "Apparently, he and his mother had a falling out. She left town, and nobody seems to know where." I paused, letting the words sink in. A part of me should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. Instead, I just felt distant, like I was watching the end of a story I no longer had a role in. I thanked Mr. Hayter and walked home. The groceries heavy in my arms, my thoughts even heavier. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the journal I'd been keeping, the one where I wrote everything I was too afraid or too proud to say out loud. I wrote about Bilal, about how I had once tried to be a father figure to him, how I'd worked overtime to pay for his education, bought him clothes, given him rides, defended him when people questioned his behavior. I wrote that I didn't hate him, I pitied him, because some people spend so long trying to outsmart life that they forget how to live it. And Samina, I wrote that I loved her once, truly. Even now, I could remember the way she laughed at old movies, the way she used to put her hand on my back when we cooked together. But love without honesty is just a mirage. You chase it until you realize it was never real. A week later, I got a call from a lawyer representing Bilal. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Mr. Marcus Rahim?" the woman asked politely. "Yes. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Bilal Zaman. He's requesting a meeting with you, not regarding any legal dispute, but to discuss something personal." There was a pause. He said it was important. Out of curiosity more than anything else, I agreed. We met at a small legal office downtown. Bilal looked rough. His clothes hung loose on him, and there was a tiredness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. But he stood when I walked in. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice quieter than I remembered. The lawyer stayed in the room but gave us space. "I won't waste your time," Bilal said. "I wanted to say something face to face. No texts, no lies, just this." I folded my arms and waited. "You tried to help me," he began, eyes dropping to the floor. "I thought you were weak. I thought I was being smart by siding with my mother, but everything fell apart after you left." He took a deep breath. "I lost everything. She drained the last of the money, and then she left. Said she was going to stay with a cousin overseas. Never heard from her again. I looked for her. Nothing." A long silence followed. "I'm trying to clean up my life," he added. "I'm working at a mechanic's shop now, sleeping in the shelter most nights. It's not much, but it's honest. And I wanted you to know, I regret what I did. What we did." I looked at him, not as the boy who betrayed me, but as the man he was becoming. Bruised, broken, maybe learning. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about letting go. And I let go a long time ago." He nodded slowly, like he knew that was the best he could hope for. Before I left, he added something that stuck with me. "I was wrong about what strength looks like. You showed me." I walked out of that office with a strange mix of emotions. Relief, closure, even a little sorrow. But most of all, I felt light. The story that had once consumed me was finally done. Back home, life continued on a steady, peaceful rhythm. The community center where I volunteered asked if I would consider speaking at a local high school, a talk about resilience and rebuilding after betrayal. I hesitated, but eventually said yes. The auditorium was filled with teens, some yawning, some scrolling on their phones, others watching me closely. I shared my story, not as a victim, but as someone who reclaimed his life. I told them, "You will meet people who take advantage of your kindness, people who try to replace your worth with their own convenience. But that doesn't define you. What defines you is how you respond. Will you fold or will you rise?" After the talk, a girl with tear-filled eyes came up to me and said, "My mom's boyfriend kicked us out. I thought nobody else knew what that felt like. Thank you." In that moment, I knew why I had gone through everything I did. Not just for survival, but to pass it on, to be the voice I once needed. Today, I live quietly. I wake up early. I go for long walks. I've even started a small garden in the back. My home, yes, my home, is filled with music, warmth, and calm. Not because life is perfect, but because I made it mine again. Sometimes I think about the past. I don't miss it, but I honor it. Because without it, I wouldn't be here, standing tall, free, whole,